I'm Lisa Shepard, and I am the Executive Director of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. The mission of the CJCP is to enhance professionalism among North Carolina lawyers, judges, and law students, a mission which it has been doing since 1998. One of the ways that the CJCP does this is to sponsor this historical video series, which is a collection of video interviews of distinguished lawyers, judges, and professionals from across North Carolina. The CJCP began filming these video interviews in 2000 as a means to preserve the thoughts of these bar leaders on the legal profession and on professionalism issues. All of the videos in this series are available to you on the CJCP website and the CJCP's dedicated YouTube channel. We are so fortunate to have had many distinguished members of the North Carolina Bar over the years, and they have much accumulated wisdom to share with us. It is important to understand that the practice of law is a profession, and doing it well requires not only substantive knowledge that one gains in law school and from studying for the bar exam, but also the value of experience learned from other lawyers. I hope that this video series will give you not only a fresh insight into the person being interviewed, but also some meaningful information about how to be a better lawyer in your own practice. Enjoy, and remember, esse quam videri. Strive to be professional in all that you do, rather than to merely seem so.
Hello, my name is Bonnie K. Donahue. I am pleased to be here today on behalf of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism to interview Judge Lillian Jordan, who is the 2010 recipient of the Chief Justice's Professionalism Award. Lillian, I've known you since the first day of law school in 1976, which is a long time. And I've had many opportunities to observe your professional life and your personal life. I can't think of anyone who is more deserving to receive this award. Congratulations.
Thank you, Kay.
Lillian, let's start first by looking at your upbringing, your early years. I know you grew up in Asheboro, Randolph County. How did that upbringing influence both your decisions about higher education and also your ultimate career decisions?
Well, Asheboro is a small town, and I graduated from high school in 1957. My parents did not finish high school. In fact, neither one of them went to high school. But education was very important to my father, and he instilled his love for learning in me. He read constantly, and he would read books, and he would read the newspaper from cover to cover. But they didn't have much money. They owned a small dry cleaners. They both worked in it. So I started working at Public Work when I was 14 years old. I had to get a working permit. Worked at a local dime store all through high school, and also worked at the dry cleaners. So I worked 2 jobs all through high school. The summer before I went to college, I worked at a local hosiery mill, Bossong's Hosiery, and I worked all 3 shifts, pre-boarding stockings. And if you've ever done that, you know you don't want to do it the rest of your life. I had already, of course, before that summer, planned to go to college. It was going to be a struggle for my parents. But I guess it was soon after school was out, my high school English teacher, Miss Wood, called to tell me that the legislature had passed a bill which would award 100 teaching scholarships, and it was the first time there were any teaching scholarships. And she encouraged me to apply for one. I did, and I got it, which really made it easier for my parents. If you received a scholarship, you did not have to pay it back. It was sort of a scholarship loan if you taught for each year that you had a scholarship. And I had it all 4 years at Guilford, and then I taught school. And so that's that, plus the fact of growing up in the Quaker meeting, which really emphasized education. And my best friends, 3 of them, we all went to church together, and we all planned to go to Guilford College, and ended up 3 of us went. One did not go with us because he was the first person from Asheboro High School to receive the Moorhead Scholarship, so he had a good excuse for not, but it was never any question that they were going to college, and so that peer pressure, good peer pressure, I guess, influenced me to think, well, I have to go too.
Are there any particular people that you can point to that were mentors for you during that period of decision making?
Several, well, at least 3 of my high school teachers who were just wonderful. Miss Winslow taught history, and I loved history. Most of my friends didn't, but I loved it, and I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to teach history, and that's when I went to college, I majored in history, and I did teach. And probably the people in my meeting also were a great influence.
Other than what you've just mentioned, why did you choose teaching as a career at that time, and could you just describe a little bit about your experience during the time you were teaching?
I thought I chose teaching because that's what I wanted to do and I would like. I'm sure one of the reasons I chose it is that women in the 50s did not seem to have much choice as far as careers. You were a teacher, or you were a nurse, or you were a secretary. And basically that was it. And I think that, I don't know that it was necessarily society that made us feel that way. It was probably our own feelings that that's all we were worthy to do. That, although I think that teaching is probably one of the most important professions that we have because of all the time that our children spend with teachers.
Where did you teach, and how long did you continue in that profession?
I only taught for 4.5 years, and the reason was because I kept getting pregnant. and I got tired of telling superintendents because at that time they didn't want you to be in the classroom if your pregnancy was showing. And so the first pregnancy I didn't get to teach. I'd signed a contract, and actually that was in Durham County, and they said that they didn't even let me start the year, actually. And that my husband was, Tom O'Brien was my husband then. He was in law school at Chapel Hill, and so we were married while I was still in undergrad at Guilford. And we moved there, so all of my teaching, 2 years of my teaching was while he was in law school. And I taught in Hillsborough and in Durham County. And then when we moved to Asheboro, I got pregnant 2 more times and taught only 1.5 years there. No, 2.5 years I taught there. And then later I had a 4th son, but I stayed home with the children for 10 years.
Did you find your teaching experience to be rewarding, and did it influence in any way your later career as a lawyer?
Well, teaching was very rewarding. I loved teaching. I loved my students. It amazes me that no longer that I taught, especially in Asheboro, that I still go down the street and see people that I taught, and they, like the president of the bank, I taught him when he was in high school, and the wife of our former chief district court judge was probably one of my favorite all-time students, and I taught her. And just recently I went to the shelter for battered women, and the woman who opened the door looked at me and said, "You're Miss O'Brien, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I was Miss O'Brien." And she said, "You taught me when I was a junior in high school. You taught me American history." And she said some nice things. I was in Lowe's Hardware just recently, and the person in front of me turned around and said the same thing, and I had taught him. So it's amazing how the students remember you after all of these years.
Ultimately, you decided to pursue a legal career. How did you make that decision, and can you point to anything in particular that influenced you in deciding on law?
When the youngest of my 4 sons started kindergarten, I was sort of at loose ends, I guess, and I was playing a lot of tennis, and I was playing a lot of bridge, and I was just playing. And my husband was working very hard. He was a lawyer. And I was on the tennis courts one day. I can see exactly where I was, and the thought all of a sudden came to me that it just wasn't fair. It wasn't fair for him to have to work so hard and to support all of us. And then the main thing that bothered me was the fact that I wanted all 4 of our sons to go to college, and I didn't think it was fair for him to have to do it, and all I was doing was play, and I should be able to contribute to at least to their education. And so then I just started thinking about going back to work. After being home for 10 years, I really did not want to go back to teaching, and the only reason was because of the lack of freedom. You go into a building in the morning and you come out in the afternoon, and I didn't know that I wanted to do that again. So I started considering what I could do, and I majored in history. I loved research. So I thought, well, maybe I could take courses and be a paralegal and do research for my husband's law firm. I looked into that, and it was going to take, at that time, it was going to take me 2 years to become a paralegal, even though I had an undergraduate degree. So I started thinking, well, 1 more year and I could be a lawyer. And during that same period of time in the middle 70s, because this was in 1975 when I had that thought about this isn't fair to my husband, I had become active in the women's movement and had tried to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed, and had actually been appointed by our county commissioners to chair a committee on the status of women in Randolph County, and we had a publication as a result of that, did a lot of surveying, and I guess you would say that my consciousness was raised. And until then, I don't think I'd ever really thought a whole lot about it. There were certain things that had occurred. I can remember in high school, my mother and daddy both worked in the same dry cleaning plant at the same hours. And they would come home in the late evening, and my daddy would lie down on the sofa and watch TV, and my mother would cook dinner, and he would say, "Bring me a glass of water," and she would. And you know, she was waiting on him, and I thought, there's something wrong with this picture. I mean, she works as hard as he does, so why does he get to come home and do nothing? She comes home and cleans, looks after 3 children, there were 3 of us, and does all the cooking. So I guess some of those things were already in the back of my mind. And then when I actually started working on it and realized the difference in pay for women, the difference in the professions that women chose, the professions that required higher education had fewer women in it. And I started thinking, you know, I bet women could do these things too. I think women are probably as smart as men. I mean, this is really a thought process and what went on. And so during that whole period of time in 74, 75, then I started thinking, and again, this had something to do with the women's movement. What if something happened to my husband? How am I going to support these 4 sons? How am I going to educate them? I need to be better prepared. I need, if something happened to him, I need to be able to support myself. I don't need to depend on someone else to support me. So, you know, there were just lots of reasons, and there were lots of reasons I went to law school, and a lot of them had to do with women and the women's movement. I never thought I could be a lawyer. We were married when the whole time my husband was in law school, and I just thought I could not imagine taking a whole semester of a course and having one exam and your whole grade was determined by that. And I honestly didn't think I was smart enough to do it, and I never considered law until that summer of 75. But the other real reason that I wanted to go is I felt that, well, maybe women aren't going into these professions because they don't see other women in them. So I decided I really wanted to be a role model, and I wanted to be a role model for young women to see that women can be lawyers. And, you know, surely they could say, well, if she can do it, I probably can. And I happen to know of quite a few young women who did go to law school and who are very successful lawyers because they did see me as a lawyer. So that part really did work.
And I know ultimately, because we were in law school together, that you decided to go to Wake Forest School of Law. How did you make that decision?
Originally, I applied to Carolina because it was cheaper. It was a whole lot cheaper than Wake Forest, and my husband was going to have to pay for it. And by the time I got out, our first child would be starting college, and then we had 3 others to go to college. So I think we ended up with 20 years of college, and some of those years we had 2 and 3 people in college, and so it seemed fairer to him to pay for Carolina than to pay for Wake Forest. So I applied to Carolina. I went down for an interview. I really did not receive any encouragement. There seemed to be some question as to whether or not I could commute to law school and have 4 children at home. There was a big question about that. And so I really just was not encouraged by the administration. When I came home that afternoon, I cried, and it was as if I had done nothing in the 10 years that I had raised my children, did lots of volunteer work. Anyway, my husband said, forget it, apply to Wake Forest. And by now it was February of '76. He said, just don't even think about Carolina anymore, just apply to Wake Forest. So I applied to Wake Forest, and they asked me to come up for an interview, and I did, and I was immediately accepted. And I never looked back. I never thought about Carolina again after that, because the reception was just so different.
Well, you've touched upon something that I think would be of great interest to people listening to this interview, and that is the fact that you commuted from Asheboro to Wake Forest for the 3 years of law school. You had 4 boys that you were raising, and I recall that the youngest one was in preschool, the oldest one was in high school, and there had to be a lot of parenting responsibilities going on. At the same time, you're trying to train to be a lawyer and becoming a young practicing lawyer. How did you balance your parenting responsibilities with the responsibilities of both learning how to be a lawyer and becoming a lawyer?
Kay, I have never said that I did this on my own, because I didn't. I could not have gone to law school and finished without the help of my husband and my 4 children. And we sort of had a routine. The whole 3 years I was in law school, I was home every afternoon when my children got home from school, except for one day, 1 week, 1 semester when I had to take juvenile law, and that was only taught at night. And so I stayed at Wake Forest that one night once a week for 1 semester. Other than that, I was always home when they got home from school. I was able to get home in time if there was a school assembly or they were participating in sports, which they did, in track and various things, basketball. I could go to their games. When they would come home from school, I would be at home studying. And they would come in and speak, and during the afternoon they might come see if they could get a glass of milk or whatever. And they felt my presence. They knew I was there. I was not in the room with them all the time. They were studying and running in and out or whatever. But I did cook dinner every night. When my husband usually got home from work between 5:30 and 6, and I always had dinner ready. And my children always cleaned up. I never had to clean the kitchen. I cooked dinner, we ate together, and then that sort of ended my responsibilities. My husband did all the washing. I never washed any clothes the whole time that I was in law school.
Could you possibly train my husband to do these things?
Well, you're out of law school. And I do have to tell you this. I know I probably told you before, this was funny. After I finished law school, my husband was in such a routine of every Saturday washing the clothes that he continued. And he actually continued washing all the clothes for several years, and I never mentioned to him that he really didn't have to anymore. And finally, I think he and I were being interviewed as being law partners or whatever, and being husband and wife. And I think I mentioned that, unfortunately, because then he stopped washing all the clothes. And we had someone who cleaned house once a week. So the house only got cleaned once a week. The kids helped look after things, and Tom did the washing, and he also looked after the kids and made sure they got to school, because I did leave every morning at 5:30, so the children didn't see me in the morning. And so he had to get them to school. I mean, I could not have done any of it without him. Oh, and I forgot, let me tell you one other funny thing. When I was talking about going to law school, Tom had always, he was a conservative fella, and he really thought that wives should stay at home and raise children, and he really never wanted me to work outside the home. So he was very happy when I didn't teach anymore and he was finished with law school. So that whole summer of 1975, once I decided that that's what I wanted to do, I spent weeks rehearsing what I was going to say to him. I spent weeks nervous and dreading telling him that this is what I wanted to do, and I was going to be real firm and real insistent. So finally, it was getting closer. I had to take the LSAT or I couldn't go, and I needed to start studying, and he would see it. So I finally, one day, he came home for lunch, and I said, Tom, I really need to talk to you about something. And I said, this is a little hard for me. I don't know what he thought I was going to say. He never said. But I said, I really want to go back to work, you know, and because I hadn't talked to him about any of this before then. And I really would like to go to law school. And he said, you know, I've been thinking about that. I guess I had talked to him about going to paralegal school. And I thought this, but anyway, I said, I really want to go to law school. And he said, you know, I've been thinking about that. I just think that's a grand idea. And I just almost could have killed him right then, because I had been through such turmoil wanting to ask him or tell him or whatever. And then he accepted it right away, and then could not have been better.
Well, I have to add one little footnote, because I remember going to your home for study weekends, and you didn't cook every meal. That man cooked the best fried chicken I think I've ever eaten.
He cooked when we had our study group, just like your husband cooked when we had the study group at your house, and like Mary's husband cooked when we had the study group at her house. All of our husbands were very, very supportive.
Right. When you entered law school, because of this earlier experience and career as a teacher, you probably were a little bit older than others in your class. Did that have any impact on your legal career?
Well, I was older than most of the people, but there were also some older than I was. I was 37, I guess, at the time, 30 many years ago. I think that it was advantageous. I think the experiences that I had had were very advantageous being in law school. I think teaching helped, because when you teach, you're really a performer. You're standing in front of 35 kids all day long performing, and so you get used to having others see what you do and hear what you have to say. I know that that helped. Also, having the kids at home, and I had to divide my time between my children and husband and law school, so the part that got left out was the social part of law school. I never was involved in anything in a social way in law school, and as I said, I'd go up there in the morning, I'd come home when class was over, and that was sort of it. So, but I think that I knew what I wanted to do, and being my age, I knew that I had to study and had to work hard to get what I wanted to do.
And you started law school in 1976.
Yes.
How many women were in your class, and have you seen the gender composition change over time?
There were around 25 women in our class, which I think was about a fourth of the class or a little less. We had, I think, a few over 100, maybe. Probably more than that started. About 90 to 100, I think, graduated total. And yes, things have changed since then. I understand now that more than 50% of most law classes would be women. That it may even be higher than 50%, I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it, I've just heard. So there are a lot more women in law school and in the profession, so things have changed. There were so few judges that you could probably count them on one hand, if any, when we were finished law school. Now, on the district court bench, there are a lot of women judges. They seem to poll well, get the votes, and also the governors have been very good about appointing women. There are not as many women on the Superior Court bench as there should be. But now, for the first time, we have a majority of women on our state Supreme Court. We have 4 women and 3 men, and that's a real first. Back from when the first woman on it was Susie Sharp, and for years and years and years and years, there may have just been 1, and some years none. And of course, I personally think that one of the best things that's happened is that we now have 3 women on the United States Supreme Court at one time, and I think that's wonderful. So it has changed. There are more women in leadership positions, like in the bars. Back in the 70s, we didn't have any women that were ever president of the Bar Association or the State Bar or any of the other specialized bars. And now we've had several women, I think, in both, to be presidents. So things have changed for women.
Following law school, how did you decide what you were going to do with your newly acquired legal training?
Actually, there was never any question. I was going to practice law with my husband in his law firm. He had 2 partners, so there were 3 of them. And it was acceptable to all 3 that I would come work in that firm. I was the only woman lawyer in Asheboro at the time.
Has that changed over the years?
Oh, it has.
too?
Now there are about 9 in that small town, 9 women lawyers practicing now. And that is a big change.
And what did you focus on in your private practice?
Family law. This, again, I said there were many reasons I went to law school, and one of the other reasons that I could enumerate is that I wanted to help women who were having problems in their domestic lives. I had been around enough lawyers because my husband had been there all these years as a practicing attorney, and we socialized with lawyers, and I really felt like they didn't have much sympathy for their female clients in domestic matters, just from things they said. And I wanted to be able to represent these women to the best that I could.
How long were you in private practice?
For 17 years.
And did you find that experience rewarding and something that you would recommend to young people starting today?
Oh, it was very rewarding. I loved my trial practice. That was great. And probably, this may go against the women's lib thing I talked about earlier, but men came to me for me to represent them, and I did represent them. And the thing that pleased me, and I don't know if surprise is the right word, but it really pleased me, I found that I could represent the men to the fullest extent that I represented women. And probably one of the highlights of that type of thing was when I had my first custody trial representing a man who truly wanted custody of his children. In those days, the women usually always got custody, and you went to court if you had a trial. It was to try to get all the visitation you could for the daddy, frankly. But this was to get custody for him, and he was awarded custody, and I'll never forget how I felt. It was wonderful, and I know how he felt. To this day, when he sees me, he tells me how he felt about it. So it was, that was a wonderful experience, and being in private practice is rewarding. I haven't done anything else other than becoming a judge, so I really don't know about corporate practice or, you know, those kinds of things. But I did do some criminal work, and I had some jury trials, and those were big highlights. I'll never forget one trial, and it was a criminal trial. Actually, it was a misdemeanor. We were finishing late in the afternoon, and the rest of the jury pool was in the courtroom, and when the jury went out, and they waited, and Judge Rusty Walker, who was not the presiding judge, came in, and he was our resident Superior Court judge, and had a seat. And when the jury came back in, it was a not guilty verdict, and the rest of the jury pool in the audience clapped and yelled. And I know Judge Walker said, "I've never seen that before." And I've had a murder trial, so I love the jury system in North Carolina. I think it works. I really think it works.
Ultimately, you became a district court judge for District 19B. How did that come about?
My husband died in...
This is your first husband?
Yeah, my husband, Tom O'Brien, who was a lawyer. He died in May of 1995. And we had, at that time, we had 2 younger partners as well as one of the other. So there were 5 of us in the law firm. And when he died, frankly, instead of getting easier to go to our office, which we had renovated, one of the first to renovate a building downtown to start making our downtown look better, and that was our law office. It got harder for me to go every day, and especially when he was a real estate attorney, and when I would pass his favorite realtor's office, or a group of them, it would always make me think of him, and it just sort of got harder to go into the office. And when we got a new judge in our district. We had 2 judges. It was 19B was Randolph and Montgomery counties, and we only had 2 judges. And the legislature, in the fall of '96, passed a bill that created another judgeship. And several people asked me to apply for it, and in the beginning I said no. I had reasons for not applying because it was a 2-year position, and I felt like that it would end in 2 years. But then I kept thinking about it, and the decision to send a letter to Governor Hunt was really based on the fact that I thought that I needed a change. I needed to get out of this office. And I sent him a letter, and he appointed me. And that was probably one of the highlights of my career, because I've enjoyed being on the district court bench so much, because all of our decisions affect people's lives, especially children and parents and people who are charged with crimes.
And how long have you been a district court judge?
Well, actually, I was on the regular bench for 6 years, and then I retired, and I became, and I am still, an emergency district court judge. As an emergency judge, I travel all over the state, and that has just been a tremendous experience, mainly because I've met such wonderful lawyers and other court personnel and other judges throughout the whole state. It really has been amazing to do that work. And by the way, in traveling all over the state as an emergency judge, I'm away from home a lot. But I have married again, and my husband's name is Tom Jordan. He actually took me to the prom when we were juniors in high school in 1956. Then it took him 40 years to ask me to marry him. But he has been very supportive of my profession, and he was very supportive when I was on the regular bench. He's been supportive as an emergency judge, and he is so excited about this award. He keeps telling me he knows why I got it, and I keep saying I don't know why I got it. So.
Are you using your legal training in any other way at the present time?
Well, I'm a certified family financial mediator now, and I've been doing that for about 8 years. Actually, being a mediator or doing arbitration, that's all you can do as far as work and earn money if you're an emergency judge. I can't practice law or anything like that, but I can be a mediator, so that's why I do both.
Lillian, you've been a law student, you've been a district court judge, a parent, you've been involved in private practice, so you've seen the legal profession from many different perspectives. How has the role of women in society changed in the legal profession over those years through your experience?
There are a lot of reasons I think that women's roles have changed, and probably primarily is economic. As things change in the economy, I think the role of women has changed. Now in our county, in Randolph County, it's actually the center of the state. It used to be full of textiles. Women have always worked. My mother worked the whole time I was growing up, and most people's mothers worked. There were, of course, a few who didn't, but it was an interesting county. It had very high percentage of home ownership, and that also may have been because of the women working, because then there were two incomes. But as far as a lot of things have changed, and you don't know if it's because of the women or the roles that they've taken. There are more divorces, but there are many reasons for divorces. And as a lawyer and as a mediator representing either side in a divorce, you know that there are many reasons for the divorce. I don't recall any divorce that was, or separation that was caused because the woman had a profession or because she was working outside the home. Now, there were some where the men have complained, I have to do everything and she's not working, and I've encouraged her and I want her to go. This is when they don't want to pay alimony. I've tried to make her go to work and she's just lazy. Yeah, that, which is not a change, I don't suppose. But there are more women in the profession, more women in our profession, more women in the medical profession, and probably more educated women than in the past. And in politics. I mean, we have a female governor now for the first time, and it's not the first time for many other states. Many other states have had more than one woman. So politically, things have changed. We have a lot of women now in the state legislature and in Congress and so on.
One might listen to what you've done over the years and think that you didn't have time for anything else. But I know that you have been very active as a volunteer and even in leadership roles in various organizations. To mention just a few, the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys, the North Carolina State Bar, the North Carolina Bar Association, committees and commissions established by our legal profession. Can you point to any of those experiences that you think have been highlights over the years that you would like to mention and reflect upon?
There are several as far as the State Bar and the Bar Association. Probably one thing I enjoyed as much as anything was serving on the Board of Law Examiners. And I did that until I became a district court judge for several years. And even since then, I've graded for several summers, so I still grade the bar exam. And I guess that could be tedious at times, you know, when you spend all day long for several days reading the same question over and over. But I guess the reason that I have liked that experience is somebody has to do it. We have to take the bar exam to be a lawyer, and somebody has to grade the exams, and I feel like that's a service to not only the lawyers, but it's a service to the state of North Carolina. And so that's a highlight. Another real highlight was I served as president of the Board of Legal Services of North Carolina, which is now Legal Aid. And I've always been interested in making equal justice under the law available to the low-income people of our state. And that was a wonderful thing. And I've served on other boards dealing with legal services, some of the offshoots of that too, and prior to that to the one in Greensboro. So those are two of the highlights as far as the law. Of course, being appointed judge was probably the highlight. But one other thing that was I'm a board certified specialist in family law. After the specialties came about through the state bar, I really never intended to sit for the exam and become board certified. My husband, Tom O'Brien, he said, "You are a specialist, and so you ought to have the designation." And so for several years, he tried to encourage me to apply and to do that. And finally, that last year that he was sick, he died of Lou Gehrig disease. When he was sick, I did apply for him, and then he died he died in May, and the exam was not until the fall. So I really several times said to myself, I'm not going to take that exam. You know, I thought, well, it's going to be like another bar exam. And now I don't have to do it. He won't know, so I'm not going to do it. But anyway, I ended up taking it and passing it, and everything's fine. I'm still a board specialist and a certified specialist.
You've mentioned several of your volunteer activities and highlights of those years of volunteer experiences. I happen to know that you are also on the Board of Trustees of the Randolph County Community College. So really, you've come full circle from your beginning, from the beginning of your professional life as a teacher. And I know you've been very active in the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys as well. Mm-hmm. Through all that volunteer activity and your professional career, you must have had many opportunities to serve as a role model to young people both considering entering the legal profession and beginning a legal career. Do you have any reflections on that aspect of your experience and what it's meant to young people?
Well, as far as at first you had said brought out the women attorneys. That also is something I should have mentioned on the previous question, because that was a highlight of my early career as a lawyer. In the middle 80s, I was president of the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys, and there were women who were on my board then that have made great strides and are leaders of the legal profession. Robin Hudson, who's on the state Supreme Court, was on the board then, and Linda McGee, who's done many things as well as be on the. So many of the women that I met then, Sarah Parker, Chief Justice Sarah Parker, went on to become leaders of our profession, and so that was a real highlight, was to serve with those women and to get to know them. As far as the role model, I have tried to conduct myself as a lawyer and as a judge in a way that would encourage young women to want to become a lawyer or to become a judge. And as I said earlier, some have. One of the highlights of my non-legal profession, my work, volunteer work and other work in our county, is that I received the Athena Award actually in 1995. I can remember that because Tom was sick and couldn't go. But and that's an award given by the Chamber of Commerce to a woman who has excelled in her profession and has been a role model for other women. And that was sort of the epitome, maybe. I mean, that was what I intended to do all those years ago, and when I started law school, and then to be recognized that, well, maybe it worked. Maybe I did do it. I didn't know consciously. I wasn't trying to, and I wasn't even really aware of that particular award at the time. But that was really a highlight, because to me, it recognized what I had hoped I had been trying to do.
A validation, a validation of what you had been doing. Lillian, your dedication and your career path clearly illustrate your love of the law. What has fueled your love of the law and your loyalty to it over the years?
Well, it probably started in 1961 when my husband started law school, and I was with him the entire 3 years and suffered through that with him. And then he was a lawyer, and I was around lawyers, and I knew what his work was like and what he did, and he excelled in what he did. And I could see the importance, I guess, of it and of the rule of law. Society needs order, and I think you need the rule of law to have order in society and to be civilized and to get along with everybody. And I personally like order. I like order in my class, well, I liked it in my classroom for sure, and I love it in my courtroom. And I like for things to be planned, and I think the rule of law helps you to know what's down the road. All you have to do is follow the law and everything is fine.
Judge, we live in a very complicated society, and some critics believe that the younger generations do not value the rule of law as much as our generations did. What is your view on that question?
I really have a different view. I think that the younger generations do respect the rule of law. I think they do so more than ever. I think they're getting more interested in politics than ever. I think that was shown in the election of 2008, when more young people registered to vote and voted than ever had before. And I think if they took the effort to do that, I think they knew what they were doing. And I think that I don't see an uproar disrespect for the law by the young people, or even by children. I have a peeve that the juvenile courts are full of cases, in some instances overruled. But so many of the criminal cases, the violation of the criminal law that come before the judges in juvenile court come from the schools. When I was a teacher, you took care of your own problems. I mean, we never, well, we didn't even have juvenile court then like we do now. The clerk of court was the judge that did juvenile court back then. But with the advent of the violence in the schools, and then the schools feeling they needed protection, and then they started having these resource officers who are trained and are policemen or deputy sheriffs. They come into the schools. So then if a child does something that if an adult had done it, it would be a crime, then they're reporting it, and they're having to come to juvenile court. And that is not the way it should be. And it's not because we have more children committing crimes, I don't think, than we did in the past or when we were there. I mean, today in a special ed class where you have children, exceptional children, they kick the teacher because they get mad at something. Well, the teacher took care of that, or the principal took care of that when I was teaching. Now they get charged with assault on a government official and come before a juvenile court judge. That's just something I don't think is right, and I probably shouldn't have said all that. But
It has been a pleasure being with you today, and as I look back on your experiences as a mother, a grandmother, a lawyer, a teacher, I have to ask one final question. What would you identify as being your top accomplishments of your life?
well, that actually is a question I don't have to think about. I would say having and raising my 4 children would have to be the highlight. I have wonderful sons, 4 sons, and I cannot think of anything I would have done instead of doing that.
Well, certainly your footprints have made great strides for women in this state. On behalf of the citizens of this state, the members of the bar, and especially women in the practice of law, thank you for your years of service. And again, congratulations.
Thank you, Kay.
First, let me thank the North Carolina Bar Association for hosting this wonderful evening here at the Pavilions. I know that we have all had a good time, and we all know that there's no group that it's more fun to have fun with than other lawyers. And so, also, let me thank the officers and members of the Board of Governors of the North Carolina Bar Association and the officers and counselors of the North Carolina State Bar for your continued commitment to professionalism among North Carolina judges, lawyers, and law students. The support of the Bar Association and the State Bar is critical in fulfilling the mission of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism, and I am sincerely appreciative of your help. I am honored to be with you tonight to present the Chief Justice's Professionalism Award. The award is presented annually to a member of the North Carolina legal community who has demonstrated the noblest attributes of the profession throughout his or her career. Tonight, I am truly privileged to honor a highly respected judge, lawyer, and colleague, one who has throughout her career personified the highest ideals of our profession, namely excellence in the practice and service to others. This year's recipient is the Honorable Lillian B. Jordan of Randolph County, North Carolina. A native of Asheboro, Lillian graduated from Guilford College with a degree in history. After teaching in the public schools for several years, and while rearing 4 sons, Lillian made the daily trek to Winston-Salem to attend Wake Forest University School of Law, graduating in 1979. She specialized in family law in the firm of O'Brien, Bunch, Watley, and Robbins until 1997, when she was appointed as a district court judge for the 19B Judicial District. In 2002, she was commissioned as an emergency district court judge and continues to serve in this capacity. She is known for her ability to manage and diffuse difficult situations and can handle the tough, emotionally charged cases with equanimity and dignity. She has earned a reputation in Randolph County and throughout the state as a fair, impartial, skilled jurist and a dedicated public servant. In addition to her many duties and responsibilities within her practice and as a judge, Lillian has served as president of the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys, of the Randolph County Bar Association, of the 19B District Bar, and of Legal Services of North Carolina. She has served on the Board of Trustees for IOTA and on the Board of Law Examiners, of which she is an emeritus member and continues to assist in grading the bar exams. As a member of the North Carolina Bar Association, she has served on the Board of Governors, the Family Law Council, the Membership Services Committee, the Long Range Planning Committee, and the Administration of Justice Committee. She has also served on the Board of Directors for Central Carolina Legal Services of North Carolina, and the North Carolina Justice Center. In addition, Lillian has served on the North Carolina Courts Commission and the Revenue Law Study Committee of the North Carolina Legislature. Beyond her involvement with the bar, Lillian has been a pillar of her community, having served on the Board of Directors of Women's Aid, Inc., the Asheboro-Randolph Chamber of Commerce, Randolph County United Way, and the Randolph Hospital Community Health Foundation. She currently serves on the Randolph Community College Board of Trustees. As would be expected with this record of service, Lillian has received many civic distinctions. She has been named JCette of the Year twice by the Asheboro JCs. She received the Guilford College Alumni Excellence Award and the Athenia Award from the Asheboro-Randolph Chamber of Commerce, and was named a Paul Harris Fellow by the Asheboro Rotary Club. In the many circles in which she has moved, legal, civic, educational, and political, Lillian is admired and respected. She is the epitome of the citizen lawyer who has tirelessly served the legal profession and her community with integrity and excellence as a public servant, a caring neighbor, and a friend. She has promoted the highest professional standards throughout her exemplary career and has set an extraordinary example for all attorneys and judges by her selfless dedication and commitment to the law and her fellow citizens. Lillian truly deserves this honor which the Professionalism Commission bestows upon her. Therefore, as Chief Justice of North Carolina, I am proud to present the 2010 Chief Justice's Professionalism Award to the Honorable Lillian B. Jordan. This award reads, "The Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court presents the Chief Justice's Professionalism Award to the Honorable Lillian B. Jordan for your dedication and commitment to the principles of professionalism in the legal community in North Carolina. Sarah Parker, Chief Justice, January 19th, 2011.
Thank you, Chief Justice Parker. Thank you to the State Bar and President Tony DeSanti, and to the Bar Association and President Jeannie Pridgen. It is indeed a privilege for me to be here, and I must admit that this was very much a surprise when I received the letter last summer, and it is very humbling. If I truly deserve this award, it is not my doing, but is that of the many true professionals who have influenced my life. I'm going to try to get through the next part. Okay, I think once I get through there, I'll be okay. Because the first was Tom O'Brien, to whom I was married for 36 years until his death in 1995. He encouraged me to go to law school at the age of 37. He encouraged me to participate on State Bar and Bar Association boards and committees in leadership capacities. He encouraged me to become a board-certified specialist in family law, and he encouraged me to be active in our community. My law partners also encouraged me and allowed me to be away from the practice on bar business. One of my former law partners is still contributing to our profession as the bar counselor from our judicial district. And Ed Bunch is here, and I'd like him to stand. Ed. The great news about Ed is that he just became a grandfather for the first time about 2 weeks ago. And he is very excited. Not only was Tom O'Brien the ultimate professional in his own life and the practice of law, but he was also, this is the hardest part, he was also the best father in the world. And he gave me my 4 wonderful sons, and they're all here. I also have their wives, and I have Tom's partner David, and these 4 gave me my 5 grandchildren, and they are all here. Would you please stand? I also have here tonight, as a part of my family that I would like to stand, is my present husband's son and daughter and his daughter's fiance. And if you would please stand, the 3 of you. I cannot begin to name all of the lawyers in our state who were and are great examples of professionalism to all of us. But I really do want to name a few. All of you will know all of these fine lawyers. Linda McGee, with whom I served on many boards. Woody Teague, who served for many years as the chair of IOLTA. Walt Brinkley, who chaired the Board of Law Examiners. Roy Davis and Bill Davis, former presidents of the State Bar, and they are now serving, by both of them serving on the Board of Law Examiners. And Ozzie Askew, who has done everything and won everything, one of the best trial lawyers in the state. And Clarence Horton, who in his unselfish way has contributed much to the lawyers of this state and to the citizens of this state. And also the many lawyers who work for Legal Services, now Legal Aid of North Carolina, and the many lawyers, many of you are here tonight, who served on that board, so that the less fortunate in our state would have access to equal justice. And this has been a prime project of the Bar Association. And because of the Bar Association, we do have legal aid in North Carolina for civil legal services. And also, leaders of our profession are the professionals, that is, our executive directors, if you will, of the various bars and the boards who have kept our profession alive and who work for all the lawyers and citizens of the state. The deans of these, of course, are Alan Head and Fred Parker, who are both here. I do need to make a special mention of, I guess you could call it my law school study group. These were dear law school classmates of mine who have been at all of my happiest occasions and my saddest, and they're all here tonight. Mary, Susie, and Kay. My husband read my speech after I wrote it, but I had left off one short paragraph, which is now in it. He didn't read. I would like to thank my husband, Tom Jordan, for loving and marrying me in spite of 3 facts. I'm a lawyer, I'm a Democrat, and I'm a Tar Heel fan, and he's a Dookie. I do want to thank him for his support and encouragement. And he, by the way, has always set an example for professionalism in the furniture industry. And finally and foremost, I would like to thank our Chief Justice. Chief Justice Parker, thank you for setting the example of true professionalism for all of us and for your unselfish service to our profession and our state. Thank you.